Catherine. So, yeah, what I'm going to talk through actually today is it's about implementing the UXDX model. So I'm not sure who's been to the website and seen the kind of the Trinity logo thing that we have, but that's been my life basically for the last few years as I've been trying to figure out how we can accelerate some product delivery, and not just accelerate the delivery, but also the success of the product. So a little bit of background about myself. As Catherine said, I've been heading closer to 15 years doing IT project delivery, and at the start it was always, I thought we were doing it right. We were following best practice. Waterfall was the way to do things. It was great. I was working for some big name brands, and everything was going according to process, but it was just very slow. This is probably my internal kind of feeling of how things worked. It was moving at a snail's pace. And it wasn't just that, it was that we were moving at a snail's pace, and then it was a lot of aggression back and forth between the business and the IT, because they spec'd something a year in advance and they were supposed to get everything right, but they didn't. And just this process didn't seem right. So then about 5 or 6 years ago, I was kind of thinking, okay, there's this Agile thing. It's getting a lot of traction, more so in startups. My background, as I was saying, is more enterprise rather than the startups. So I was like, okay, this is how we can do things faster. So I did a lot of research into DevOps, and particularly like early stages of just Agile delivery, moving into that continuous integration, continuous delivery models. So then I said, okay, I've got this. What I'm going to do is my own startup. So we set up a startup. We had a group of about 8 of us. We kept it going for quite a few months, but we were applying all the practices that we had learned. So we were taking all of that learning around how to get a product out quickly. We were doing MVPs. We were getting it out testing, regular testing with the market. But one thing that was still missing, because we were very much focused on the DevOps kind of delivery side of things, was we were missing the UX side of things. And what I quickly realized is, you can be going very fast, but unless you hit your target, it's going to become a bit of a mess. So this was basically what happened to our startup. We were going very fast, we were iterating, we were going out to the market, but we were never quite getting that product market fit. So we ended up, basically the startup fell apart. But it was a great learning, and what it taught me was that we need to make sure that how can I make sure before I spend all that money and effort in delivery that we're going to hit the right market, that we're going to actually build something that people want to use. And what struck home with me, I don't know if you've heard of Peter Drucker, he's kind of the father of management science, or the science of management. And he said there's nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. So that was my thinking of what we did on the startup. We were doing it very well, but we shouldn't have been doing it at all. There wasn't the product market fit. So then I was going through all of the design thinking. I did a lot of research into UX, reading about like the best practices, lean UX, and how we can use the design thinking, empathy with your customers, quick iterations, prototyping before you actually build, and then how we can get that kind of through to market quickly. And I really struggled with trying to figure out, well, how do I get that linked in with the DevOps stuff that I'm kind of more familiar with from an IT delivery point of view. So that was the real kind of challenge that I faced. And that's where we came up with this model. And what we've been doing is we're building out the roles and responsibilities behind this, what events are taking place, what actions are taking place. So that's a quick background on what the model is. But I guess what's more important is how we turn this into practice. So it's all very well and good having a theory. Sorry, I think over here I'm probably standing in less people's way of the screen. So it's all very well and good having a theory, but how do you actually deliver on that? How do you put this into practice? So what I was thinking about with the UXDX model is the key things is it touches so many different parts of the business or parts of delivery that you need to step back and figure out where do I tackle first, because there's so many things, so many people, so many groups involved in that. If you're trying to implement this in a company, you need to figure out where do I start. So it's all about identifying the bottlenecks. So look at each step in the process, and the really important thing to keep in mind is optimize the whole, not the parts, because what I've seen happen badly is that people go, well, I've got a problem in my area, I'll fix that. That gets really efficient, but the bottleneck is somewhere else, and it makes everything worse. And then to be a champion of change. So you're one person, or maybe there's 3 or 4 people from your organization, but you're not going to change the world alone. What you need to do is to become a champion of change, get everybody to agree on the bottlenecks, get everybody to agree on the solutions, and then almost hand off to other people to let them do the delivery. So what I'm going to talk through now is, the concept is if there's no vision, people are going everywhere. If you try to enforce a vision on people, they might follow for a bit, but they're going to reject it, they're going to push back. So until you get everybody agreed on what's needed and the vision that they need to go towards, that's when you're going to be able to deliver. So as Catherine mentioned, about the last 4 years, I've been actually in the aviation industry. So I've been a program manager at both Ryanair and Aer Lingus. So I'm from Dublin, if the accent doesn't give it away. So my Finnish is pretty poor. But so yeah, my background is really about how could we implement this model in both Ryanair and Aer Lingus. And my roles there were a little bit different. So I was in a back office role where I wasn't looking at front-facing systems. I was looking at kind of systems that the organization used internally. So there was a very different model to Aer Lingus, where I'm working on the mobile apps, the mobile website, the UI-facing elements. So just it's kind of interesting, the contrast between the two. And one thing I noticed, though, even though they were quite different, is there was consistent problems between the two that I've faced, and I've seen this in pretty much every organization that I've worked with. Shared vision. So there's silos of vision. There's people who kind of know roughly what they need to do. There's people who have bits of information, but what was always lacking everywhere I've been is that you could ask anybody what's the vision, and they should be able to answer that. People should be bought into and aligned on what the vision is, but often that's not the case. The UX and dev barriers is another big problem. So fortunately, if you're fortunate enough, there's still some organizations out there that don't even have UX yet. So if you're fortunate enough to have a UX team, you're definitely ahead of a lot of organizations, but they're very often, UX might sit in marketing and development sits in IT. And because of the differences there's barriers that just from politics or how teams are structured get set up. So overcoming those. And then the quick feedback. So this is about just implementing those DevOps loops, getting your experiments out there, finding out what's happening. A lot of companies, they're moving towards quick delivery, but they're still quite a bit away. So talking on shared vision, how did we tackle that in both Aer Lingus and Ryanair? So as I was saying, the UX team might have a better understanding of the shared vision, but even in those teams, there's silos of information. So very often, like there'll be people who know a good bit about it, there'll be people who know other sections, but there isn't that joint up vision about what is needed. But then when you get to the development teams, they just get told, here's a feature, go build that feature, and they don't really understand why they should be building that or what the background is. So that leads them to, I guess, frustration, pushback, and all the challenges that I'm sure you face. So what we did was kind of taking from the design thinking approach, get everybody into a room. Just get an all hands kind of workshop. And what I mean by all hands was all the stakeholders involved. So whether that's your marketing team, your customer services team, anybody who's interacting with the system that you're using, and then also the people building it. So your BAs, your QAs, your devs, your data analysts. So anybody who's involved, get everybody into a room. So there can be quite a few people in there, but the idea is that using these workshops, and I'm going to step into a little bit more detail about what types of workshops we've done, but using this, it really helps get that shared vision and shared buy-in from everybody. So the two things that we've kind of focused on most, and these actually align to whether I was working on front-end kind of user-facing or the back-end. So with the front-end users, it was really around the jobs to be done framework. So has anybody heard about jobs to be done? Okay, a handful, so not that many. So I'll just explain what it is. The concept is that people don't buy your product. If you're working in a company, you're very much focused on this is the product that we're building, but people don't buy your product. You don't wake up in the morning going, I'm going to buy I don't know, there's a famous example with a milkshake. They don't wake up thinking that. What they do is, I'm on the go, I'm hungry, I need something that I can have in my car. Like, these are the options. A bagel might be too messy, a hamburger might drip everywhere, but the milkshake is great because that fits my job that I need to do at this point in time. So what you do is you shift from thinking about your products to thinking about the jobs that the customers actually are trying to achieve. And that makes you then, it really opens up the options for where you go with your product as well. It's been really successful for us. And the outcome is basically it shifts people from thinking about products to the customer. The other session we've done, and we did this more on the back office ones, is what's known as event storming. So it's, from the outside, it looks like you're sticking stickies up on a wall. It doesn't look very different to anybody on the outside. But really what we're doing here is we're looking at an internal process. We're getting all of the people involved in the process. And you start with events. You have a particular color sticky for your events, and you stick those up of anything that can happen. So an order gets fulfilled, an order gets shipped, or something like that, and you stick them all up. And then you work out, okay, who's involved in this? Who are the people? That's a different color. What are the triggers? That's a different color. And by the time you finish mapping that out, basically one of the surprising things is always the people, the owners of the process sit back and go, is that really how it works? Because they can see the bottlenecks. They can see that something just sits there for 2 weeks because somebody else doesn't have time to look at it. So it was great for getting awareness of the problems in the process that were already there that people just didn't know about. So we were able to do two things from it. It was awareness of the problems in the process, but it was also the developers then got the full end-to-end view of what they were trying to develop. So moving on to breaking down the barriers. The ideal answer, if you follow Agile, just get everybody into the same team. You just put your UX people into your same Scrum team. That's great, but there's often a lot of problems in companies. So you can have different departments, people have different priorities, and there's politics to play. So often, if you're in one of those companies, so if you're in a company like Musician where they have UX in their team, well done, you're great. But if you're in one of those companies that you're really struggling with this because of those departmental kind of barriers, there are other ways of trying to break it down. So what we've done, and particularly my experience with Aer Lingus, we haven't been able to get that full cross coverage that we had hoped for. We're making steps, but we're just not there yet. So what I found is just by doing that shared vision, people then start getting that empathy automatically. So they start communicating more frequently anyway. Even if they're not in the same Scrum team, they just start talking to each other more, and that breaks down all the miscommunication and barriers that were there previously. It's not perfect, but it's a way of getting there. And on the quick feedback, there's kind of two areas that I think of. Every company that I've literally gone to has been very feature focused. What's the feature? What are we building? Okay, just tell me the feature and we'll build it. But they don't understand the outcomes. So it's trying to shift people's mindsets from being feature focused to outcome focused. And then the other one is around the actual delivery. So you need your IT department to be delivering quickly in order to be able to get that fast feedback and do those learning cycles. So on the feature side of things, this is a famous image, and I don't like it because everyone looks at this and just goes, oh, that makes sense, but it has absolutely no relevance to my company. Our products are so different. It can't work for us. Like, it's great in a drawing, but I don't know how to implement that. So the problem with this, though, if you go with the top line, which is breaking it into components, like think of a big feature and what are all the components, is you have nothing until you have everything. So there's no value that can be delivered over time. And the customer is basically upset the whole way until they get the end product. So what I always think a better example is, you ask people to think of an eye. And you go, okay, so the feature is an eye. I want to see. So an eye is an incredibly complex thing. It's very hard to break it down. Like, you couldn't separate some features of an eye. So it's one of the biggest arguments against evolution in the past. It was, well, half an eye is useless. Until you have the full eye, you can't see. But then what they noticed is actually there's a million different variations of an eye. There's eyes that are just light sensitive. Can I see light or can I see darkness? There's ones that can detect direction. So I know the light's over there or the light's over there, and I can retreat away from the darkness. Shapes, just being able to see shapes, being able to focus on some of those shapes, and then having a variable focus so that you can shift between short and long distance. So that's just an example that I use, that Squeamish people say they don't like the slide, but I find it gets a bit more buy-in, and then we go into actual use cases of specific requirements that we're working on to kind of hit it home with people. On the DevOps side, I'm going to brush over this quickly because this could be a whole kind of session or a whole day or two of just talking about how you can speed up delivery. There's a hell of a lot involved in DevOps, but it is critically important, and it is one of the things that you do need to look at to get that fast feedback. So what outcomes have we achieved in Ryanair and Aer Lingus trying to implement these changes? The biggest one for Aer Lingus is the product ownership model is changing. So it used to be very much around fares, around ancillaries, so seats and bags. There was an owner for seats, an owner for bags, and very product focused. Whereas now they're completely shifting to be customer journey focused. So when you're being inspired to take a trip, when you're searching for that trip, when you're booking the trip, it's the jobs that you're doing at each of those stages along. So that's how they're re-architecting the organization. Metrics everywhere. So previously it was, go build this feature because I told you to go build this feature. But what's happened now is we've got the team to challenge everything. It's kind of, okay, but why? And the 5 whys, I guess, is the famous one. It's kind of, okay, but why are we building this feature? What's the outcome that we're trying to achieve? The biggest challenge we had facing this was the product owners got very defensive. They felt they were being challenged the whole time to justify themselves. They had done the work, they'd done the research, and now they kept getting asked the question, why are we doing this? But over time, they actually saw the benefit because in a couple of instances, they actually saw, okay, we can tweak things, we can do things a bit quicker, we can do things a bit more efficiently. And that helped win them over. So change is difficult, but there are benefits. And then problems agreed. So we're not there yet. So I'm currently, as I said, with Aer Lingus. We're getting to the point where all the problems are agreed, which is a giant step from where we were. That people are agreeing on where the bottlenecks are. So the next challenge is just getting agreement and alignment on the solutions. So just for you guys, the actions to take away. If you are looking to do any change, try look at each of the steps of this. Go talk to people, walk around the building, and just ask, kind of figure out who's doing these kind of functions and what are the handovers, particularly between each of these, and try figure out where's your biggest bottleneck, because that's where you should start. Start always at the biggest bottleneck. You need to encourage other people to help you. If you try to do it on your own, you're just going to hit a brick wall and eventually it'll wear you down. So what you need to do is you need to encourage other people to buy into the problem, then buy into the solution, and ultimately then you can start delivering the change you need. My biggest learning recently is everybody loves progress, but as long as it's in another department that needs to change. So it's kind of just taking it slowly, recognizing that people don't like change, but it's necessary to take things forward. And persistence pays off. So it might seem like you're not getting anywhere, but just seeding those kind of thoughts of change actually do start delivering over time. And just on the model, I'd love some more feedback. So as I said, I've been testing it out in 2 different companies, but part of this event and part of all the kind of outreach we're doing is to learn more about other people's experiences. So if you want to email me directly about any questions or any thoughts that you have, please do. I'd love that feedback. And that's it. So if anybody has any questions, I'd love to take some.